Teacher Tuesday presentation for this semester, and it is based on storytelling. Um, Before we go through everything, I'd just like to say hello. My name is Matt, and I'm here because I had a problem, and that's a hand wave. Okay, basically, this isn't necessarily my desk, but I thought I would go through my own life in general, away from school, and just kind of declutter a lot of stuff and make things as simple as possible. And I've kind of been doing this for the past couple years. Um, Mainly because I'm trying to streamline everything, and it's kind of worked for me. Mainly because of I can't be overwhelmed unless you're never whelmed, which I thought was funny. And so as I'm trying to figure out the solution to this problem and whatever, it took me a while to just kind of decide to declutter because I'm not necessarily a pack rat. I just don't like to get rid of stuff. And so I'd also thought about, well, how can we do this in school? How can I do this in my classroom? How can I do this with assignments, with everything else? And so I decided to do it in school as well. This is kind of a work in progress. A it's been a little harder, I think, because it's social studies and it's not really storytelling. Although I think that everything can be storytelling, and I don't mean storytelling as in like once upon a time, but I mean like people want to listen to stories. I know when I'm in class and I'm reading something that a student has done, I am more willing to listen or read something where I am engaged with. And maybe there's something funny in it, maybe there's a problem and solution. Um, but no matter what it is, it needs to have some sort of story. Because if not, it's just boring, and people listen to stories. And so I decided that treat everything as a story. Now, obviously, it's not, easier said than done, but the reason I decided to do this is because everything is a story. You get up, you you go about your day, you go from this to this to this, and there's a plot. Whether we think of it as a plot or not, there is. Every interaction that you have with someone is basically a story or a part of your story for the day or the week or the month or the year or your life. And so storytelling, and I found this and I thought it was good, is about connecting to other people and helping people to see what you see. And I think of students and I think of them in a way that they're trying to get across something that I need for to see from them. And then I'm telling a story of maybe I'm giving an assignment or giving information about a topic or doing anything, whether it's just how I lay out my lesson, whether it's how I put together an assignment on Canvas or whatever, is that they need to be able to see that clearly for clarity's sake. Because the less questions I think is better that you have to do it, because then you're doing a pretty good job. The problem was that I needed a plan that everything would fit under, and so my background besides education is obviously graphic design, and so I found this through a marketing thing. I've started listening to Entree Leadership, which is a podcast based upon the book Entree Leadership by Dave Ramsey. And Donald Miller was a guest on the show one time, and he was talking about marketing and branding and your website layout. And so all of this was making total sense to me in my graphic mind. But I thought, well, how can we do this in school? How can we do this in classrooms? And so I started looking at StoryBrand, which is Donald's company. And then these three links at the bottom here are links from Entree Leadership, where it talks about branding your story and 1 and 2, and then doubling your revenue to clarify your message. And that clarify your message one is the first one that I heard, and it was all about how to make a quick, and it's almost like a thesis statement, or what you are, what your company is. And it just lays it out very nicely. There's like a step by step process that he goes through. It's not necessarily tied to storytelling, but it's a part of it. And so all these links are here for you to check out. But basically, he goes through this thing, and it's from this book at the bottom here. It says From How to Tell a Story. It's an ebook by Donald Miller. It's like 30 pages, but there's big pictures, and it actually just explains everything. And he kind of ruins a lot of movies for you, because almost every successful story or successful movie follows this same plot. And it's very similar to the plot that you're going to teach in language arts or whatever, but it's still very simple that you can use it across every single platform, I think. So a character has a problem, he meets a guide that kind of helps him along the way. It could be a person, it could be, I don't know, it could be anything, who gives him a plan and then calls him to action, and that action either results in success or failure. It's very simple. Very, very simple, but very effective. In a speech, this is this is from the book, but it just talks about how he gives speeches. And so he introduces himself, then he talks about something he wanted for his business, perhaps a goal or something like that, and he meets a friend or he reads a book or he finds an article and that helps him, and then he takes a risk and goes through it, and does he end in failure or success? And he goes through this whole thing, and it's very interesting because it's very simple, but it gets right down to the point. And I think that's one of the most important things with students, is that you need to be clear in as little words as possible, unless you're adding tons of details or something like that. But you just need to be clear on stuff. This is building a story brand. It's a podcast and an article that it's worth reading. It kind of connects everything together. Now it is more marketing based, but still could be used in the classroom. This next one is mystorybrand.com, which is based upon the storybrand.com stuff, but it goes through the entire process. And once you go through this, what else is really interesting is that it has videos for every single step of the story. And so if you and they're up here, and if you go to this, you can do it. But I just took a screenshot. Is that if you click on this, they're like 5 minute videos, and they are so in depth and detailed that once you go through it, you'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. This makes sense. Yada yada yada. And so the whole thing is laid out for you. And this is obviously it's for branding and marketing, but it's every single thing you do in classroom. Like if this is an assignment, you are trying to convince me, the teacher, or whatever you're doing. Maybe it's more globally based or whatever, but you're trying to convince them all of this stuff that it is a success. And I know that when I read a student's response in something, when there's a little flair, when there's it follows a nice plot, man, it's so better to read. It's so easier to grade. It's better to read, and it's just easier because that's how I want students to do. Now you can obviously tell the ones that don't have that. As far as classroom application, um, as a teacher, it's going to help you with your delivery, because it's every day you're introducing stuff. Well, how is your storytelling? Are you going to get kids excited? It helps with designing lessons to know that this is the beginning, here's the end, yada. You just go through the whole thing. Helps with designing assignments. Helps with talking to students and parents. And I know that that's something that I struggle with, is that I really don't want to talk to parents that much. But it does give a nice framework for saying, hey, this happened because of this, and it just makes things clear. Helps with grading, and I talked about this earlier. The best students are usually the best storytellers, in regards to maybe getting an A or whatnot. I want to read their work, and I don't want to read boring. It's just I don't want to do that, and I know you don't either. And so if we can get people to tell stories, which no matter what endeavor they go into later on in life, they'll be able to use storytelling. Let's see here. Other transfers to the classroom from a student. It helps with keeping it simple. I've mentioned, I've kind of used this throughout the year, um, the whole plot line thing that he went through. I've used it on a lot of assignments, maybe not a ton, maybe 5 or 6, but now they know it, and they know that it is pretty simple, and it keeps it simple for them, that you're not having to introduce something new and new and new. And I understand that it's a little bit different than, the plot mountains or whatever that the language arts teachers are teaching, but it works for my class. Helps with understanding. People want to listen to and create stories. I think people want to do that because it's interesting to them, and they want to listen to it. No one wants to get up and listen to a presentation that's boring. They want you to engage with it. Helps with completing assignments. They know when stuff are done, because they follow that process. And helps with giving a framework for communication that students can have, they can use for anything. For the world, transfer to the world. Helps with communication. No matter what endeavor they go into, and I said this earlier, they're going to have to use storytelling in one way or another. Helps with leadership, to get people to do something. Helps with telling your own story. how easy is it to tell your own story now, with blogs and YouTube and vlogs and everything else. Helps with learning how to give others a voice, and helps with clarity, which I think is probably the most important thing. This year in Excel in first semester, we did do a podcast. Every student did a podcast, and you can find it at the link there at the bottom. But we just called it Cadet Cast. This was mainly for them to kind of do on their own, but I did give them a lot of framework for using this specific story branding layout of how to tell a story. Now, did they follow it? No, not all the time, but it gave them a nice way of opening it up. You can listen to some of them. Some of them are great. Some of them are not great, and it just kind of went into how much you put into it. If you want to know how we did that, just let me know. We basically used. Oh, here, put it in here. We find a topic. They created a Google site. They create graphics for the site, develop plans for the podcast, and they start making it. They recorded using Twisted Wave, and then put that in their drive, and then embed that audio file in your Google site, and then just repeated it again with the same thing. Hopefully they went through that. It was kind of a lot of just them doing it on their own how they wanted to, but I tried to help them give a framework for that. Another thing that I tried to do this year with towards the end of the year was just a classroom podcast, and I created this on Anchor, and I found out that this is probably the easiest way to create a podcast. You don't have to really have any knowledge of how to do it or what to do, but it's just an app on your phone. I can't remember if there's a Chromebook app for it or if you can do it. I think you can also do it through the desktop or just from the Chrome browser wherever you are. I think you can use your Chromebooks too, but I found it easier to use or at least record from my phone. And I can just, you open up the app, it's very simple. You hit record and you just tell your story. And not necessarily, it doesn't have to follow this line, but you could use these podcasts however you want to do it. And you can just do a quick listen or search for CMS Mr. Miller on any of your podcasting sites, especially Apple Podcasts. And so Anchor automatically posts it there, which is nice. And so I'm really into podcasting, and so that just comes up now. If you want me to explain any of that, just let me know sometime. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then I've just been kind of given. I used to do, and I've done it earlier this year, state of the class addresses on Friday or every other Friday, and it just got to be a little too much. I was making, kind of basically videos of it, basically a news, kind of like what Mr. Winters does. Not that extravagant, but I've been doing things like that. And I thought, well, I need to make it clearer, and not have to take so much time to do it. And I thought, why not just a quick podcast? And it's just, I think I just gave an update this week on what was happening. I don't even know if anybody listens to it, but it's good for me to try and do that. And I think that's it. Yep, that's all the stuff I have for storytelling. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully, this gave you an idea or some links. More importantly, some links that you can try it out and kind of see what it's like yourself. And hopefully, something resonated, and you can put a little bit of something into practice.